Hello everyone, this is Justin Smythe from nextbigtrade.com. This is a review of Stage 2 Breakout Pullback Buying Opportunities for April 19th, 2024. Starting off with a couple cannabis stocks. As we've been discussing in recent newsletters, the cannabis sector is still early in a new Stage 2 investor breakout. And you can see on this chart of ACB, which is a small cap stock in the sector, it recently had a massive explosion higher on volume, starting to move into stage 2. And then on this recent pullback, you can see the weekly price action has consolidated nicely sideways in a tight overall range while volume has contracted to the downside. This is favorable price and volume action, especially after a massive, explosive breakout on, just utterly massive volume here. So overall, while the S&P 500 is, processing this correction, the stock is just going sideways and potentially setting up a new up leg higher, especially when pressure from the S&P 500 starts to, dissipate. And once that occurs, typically stocks like this can then start to break out higher. So this stock is acting very bullishly while the S&P 500 is correcting. You can see on the daily chart, this stock, after a big move higher over multiple days, it is now pulled back on lighter volume to the 20-day moving average, and it bounced off it on Thursday. So, if the stock market's getting ready for a bounce here, this stock could, set up and then potentially move higher even as early as next week, I think. The other stock is CGC. Same type of thing where we had a big explosive breakout. You can see how the volume exceeded the previous stage 2 breakout attempt, and then we've got a lower volume pullback, held support at the 30-week and 10-week moving averages. On the daily chart, you can see that this one came down through the 20-day moving average but bounced off the 10-day moving average so far, and showing an increase in volume at the end of last week while the stock market was under pressure. So again, a bounce is setting up here, and longer term, as long as this one holds up above moving averages, this S&P 500 correction could really be setting up the pullback buying opportunity that then turns into a new stage 2 uptrend once the S&P 500 is done with its correction. Moving to precious metal stocks, another sector that has potential to act well even with the S&P 500 under pressure. FSM, after an initial massive move higher, it's kind of pulling back on lighter volume, kind of just going sideways, not giving back a lot of the recent gains so far. On the daily chart, you can see how volume is contracting as we're starting to approach the 20-day moving average. This is bullish price action, and this one might not even get down to the 20-day before it starts to move higher again. It already started to move higher on Friday on above average volume. So this one's in, a good buying range potentially if it does get back to the 20-day moving average, or even as early as next week if the precious metals start breaking out again. MUX, another major leader, again having a small digestion after a big run higher, volume starting to pull back a little bit. On the daily chart, you can see how it held the 20-day moving average during a sharp pullback. Now it's kind of finally pulling back to that moving average, but again, volume is continuing to declined again on Friday, holding the moving average, setting up a breakout potentially out of this consolidation. EGO, similar pattern here, digesting the gains, pulling back, volume's declining on the daily chart. You can see volume tapering off very quickly here. This is very bullish volume action. No selling up here, declining to the 20-day moving average. This one's set up to break out again probably shortly here, especially again if the US dollar starts breaking down next week as well. Uranium stock, CCJ. Uranium stock started to break out a couple weeks ago and then kind of stalled this past week or so, still kind of consolidating sideways with minimal overhead resistance. So we'll see if the uranium stocks can kind of turn around here. On the daily chart, you can see how CCJ is kind of pulling back on lighter volume to the 20-day moving average as well. So potentially setting up follow through here higher. I would say that the uranium stocks are acting worse than the precious metal stocks. So I would favor precious metals over uranium, but we'll see if the uranium stocks can follow through here. And then finally, biotech stock BKTX pulling down to the 10-week moving average here. This one has been a monster winner in 2024 and has taken about 6 weeks to digest the gains from this big move higher all the way back down to the 10-week moving average. Notice how volume is declining massively on this pullback. That's bullish volume action. And then if we jump down to the daily chart, you can see how volume has tapered off. We've pulled back to the 10-week moving average, respecting the gap up higher still, which is important on all these pullbacks. And you've basically got a low risk buying opportunity where using the gap as kind of a stop loss area. There's minimal downside, potential lots of upside here, especially if more volume comes into the stock. I would look for an increase in volume to confirm another move higher. So another big winning biotech with a potential pullback buy opportunity here. But overall, with the stock market potentially set up for maybe at least a bounce heading into next week, these pullback buys are setting up as well. I think really cannabis and precious metals, I think, are the two key sectors to watch for, good opportunities, with both sectors could resume upside as early as next week.